Welcome to Life on Maui. I'm your host, Stephen Freid. We're coming to you live from this beautiful residence in Wailea Kai. Thank you to Lee. And our guest today on Life on Maui with Stephen Freid is Dr. Gary Schubach, an associate professor of human sexuality. His doctoral research project was Female Ejaculation and the G-spot. A few months ago we had Mahalia on. She spoke somewhat on the same subject, but Gary's a real expert. Well, she is as well, but he is in a different way. He's done a lot of research, and there was so much interest in this, including some prominent members of our community that I won't mention by name, that I just felt like when Gary approached me, I said, absolutely. So, welcome to the show, Gary.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. I wanted to do this for a long time.
And I've wanted to do this for a long time, too. So, what is the G-spot, or what is the myth of the G-spot? However you want to answer that.
Okay. The term the G-spot first appeared in 1981, just before the release of the book, The G-spot, and other recent discoveries about human sexuality. This was a runaway bestseller in 1981. But the problem is the term, the G-spot. This has become a very well-known phrase in the community, in the world. Yeah. There's millions of searches every day on the internet on this subject. But it is not an anatomically correct term.
Aha.
This was a term that was created by the marketing department of this book, and it was a brilliant job. I mean, the term has become part of the culture. But the problem is that no one knows what it means, and the medical profession is confused by its inaccuracy.
Aha. Now, so what is it? What is there an anatomical spot? What's the reality of it? You've done a lot of research about this.
Okay. There is not a spot on the upper wall of the vagina. And this is pretty common knowledge, and almost all doctors who at some point in time in medical school had to work with cadavers and have had enough anatomy where they know there is not only not a spot on the upper wall of the vagina. In fact, the concentration of nerve endings in the upper wall of the vagina is less than in the lower part of the vagina. However, the good news is women have a prostate. I mean, in most cases, it's smaller than the male prostate. Not all cases, because there's great variation. There's some men who will have very small prostates, and there are some women who will have very large prostates. Now, for years, the term was known in medical science as Skene's glands. If you ask a doctor, they'll know what Skene's glands is. They'll know what periurethral glands are. But G-spot is not a technically accurate term. There is no spot on the upper wall of the vagina. G refers to Ernst Gräfenberg, who wrote a brilliant paper in 1956 on the subject of the human female prostate.
So that's where G-spot came from, was from his name.
Right, and the authors of this book, I'm trying to get them now in their later years to be more honest and transparent about the process that the book company went through to get to this title, like what their alternative titles were that they were offered.
Yes.
But I mean, I grant this one was very effective, but the problem is 30 years later, we are still debating whether there is a G-spot.
So you're coming around, you're talking about something, a prostate that's an equivalent somehow on a female. So where's that, and what's that? And
good question. In most women, it will, just like with the man, it will completely surround the urethra. But in the female, it is very close to the urethral opening, to the pee hole. So it's right near the entrance. So therefore, you can stimulate it through the upper wall of the vagina. It's on the other side of the upper wall of the vagina. Or, since it completely surrounds the urethra, you can also stimulate it from the outside by pressing right about here below the pelvic bone, most women, if they do that, will feel an urge to urinate. They've got the right spot.
Well, all right. So, I mean, looking at the female anatomy and where the clitoris is, where would it be from that spot?
Below.
Below.
The urethral opening
is below. Okay, so you're saying it can be pushed on right from the outside.
Yes,
and stimulated.
Just as with the male, you can stimulate the prostate through the anus.
Right.
But you can also get it from the other side, which is at the perineum.
Right.
If you stimulate just the right spot in the perineum, you'll get the male prostate from the other side.
Right.
Doesn't have to be done through the anus.
Right. So is this something that you would say is a universal to all women, that this is something that can be accessed and pleasurable, or is it some women and not some women? What's been your experience with that?
Well, we, as sexologists, we have to be careful every time we use always and never.
Yeah.
Because just one case invalidates it. And statistically, not all men are born with prostates. There's a small percentage, tiny percentage, that are born without. So hypothetically, could be the same situation with the woman. But my colleagues and I have yet to find one. Sometimes they're a little smaller, but it's our belief that most women have a prostate. There was a very good statistical study of professional women, thinking that maybe professional women would know their bodies better, would have more education, and 68% of them had some expulsion of fluid during sex at some point in time in their life. They didn't know why; it just happened. So the feeling is that most women just simply don't know how to have their G-spot, female prostate, stimulated properly.
I got you.
And it also requires a very high level of both relaxation and turn-on, which are seemingly inconsistent, but they're not.
Right. Right. And so this also ties in. So how does the G-spot relate to female ejaculation, which in the street vernacular is called squirting?
Well, it can be a trigger, and it is the easiest trigger. But not the only one. I mean, in my doctoral research project, we documented ejaculation both with no G-spot stimulation at all, with no clitoral stimulation.
Huh.
We had one case just anal only.
Huh.
So actually, that leads into a really good point.
Yes.
The Gräfenberg article, the original article that this all came from, it's on my website, and I really suggest people read it.
And your website is?
drg.com, DOCTORG.com.
drg.com.
Right.
Okay, great.
And in the original Gräfenberg article, he makes the point that there are innumerable spots in the human body from which orgasm can be obtained. We haven't learned them all.
Huh.
There isn't just a clitoral orgasm or a vaginal orgasm or a blended orgasm
Or a penile orgasm.
There are hundreds of different types we just haven't discovered them.
Huh. Okay.
So the point is that our bodies are really literally wired for pleasure, and it's just a matter of really learning how that works and being able to relax our minds enough to enjoy the pleasure.
Gotcha. And where does the fluid actually come from in a woman? I mean, I think we know more about with the man where it comes from. So where does the fluid actually come from in the woman? What's it composed of? I mean, again, going back to the other interview with Maui, she's talking about the great healing benefits of it. So anything that you have to say about that, I'm interested, or we're all interested.
Okay, I do want to discuss the Maui thing a little bit. There is quite a long historic tradition of this. I mean, you see it in Tantra. I mean, actually, Aristotle wrote about it. We actually have anatomical drawings from dissections in the 16th century that show both the female prostate and also refer to the fluid. However, my doctoral research study was the landmark study in terms of Masters and Johnsons and the other pioneers had wanted to catheterize women, who were ejaculators, drain their bladders, and then leaving the catheter in, resume stimulation to see if they ejaculated where the fluid came from. And we were the first ones to do that. Since others have done it since, but I was the first one to do that.
And what's the outcome of that?
Okay, most of the fluid, when it comes to ejaculating, there's what we call squirters and there's what we call gushers. When you, for most women are just squirters, they will expel a small amount of fluid from their prostate, from their urethral glands,
right?
You know, consistent in size to what relative would be with the male.
Right.
I mean, I'm not putting out a lot of fluid these days anymore, but
as you get older,
as you get older. Now, there are women who are gushers, and you see these
pints,
streams, and done in my case of my doctoral study. This was done on bladders that were drained with a catheter.
Wow.
So one of the women actually put out as much as a full liter. I usually have a 1 liter bottle.
Well, that's what Mahalia was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Put out a liter on a drained bladder. So my hypothesis, which has actually been verified in the last couple of years by a couple of other studies, is that it's actually coming from two places. The small amount is coming from the urethral glands or the prostate, and that large amount is coming from the bladder, from residual moisture. Even though we've drained their bladders, there's still residual moisture in their bladders, and the turn on. There's a hormonal effect going on in the turn on that causes the fluid to be clear and to not have the appearance or the composition of urine.
Amazing.
I mean, we tested the urine samples on these women coming in, and then we tested them again when we drained their bladders, and then we tested them a third time after they ejaculated, after we drained their bladder. And the main components of urine, of urine, which is urea and creatinine, were about 25% of their baseline levels. So my hypothesis is that there's such a turn-on going on. There's actually a disease called aldosteronism that would replicate the same phenomenon, which is the production of too much aldosterone, which is an adrenal hormone. So that's. But in any case, I tell women, I mean, even though we know that huge amount came from the bladder, to consider that all fluids that come from their body are sacred, and that some are not profane and some are not sacred, and that this is a perfectly natural activity, and they should just get a pad or towels and have a good time, enjoy themselves.
Wonderful. It's good to know somebody's actually doing some real research here. So, in closing, why is this matter still so controversial?
Well, there's this big question, which is, does the G-spot exist or not? Because, again, the confusion over this term. The use of the term itself is keeping medical science from coming to accept this. That word, that's the spot word. And this is just a matter of high public interest because it is such it's a step up in terms of a level of pleasure. In Gräfenberg, in his original article, the first line of the article is, and he didn't have the statistics we have now, which is most women don't orgasm through intercourse.
Right.
I mean, he didn't know the numbers we know now.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
He was absolutely right in 1956.
Right.
And stimulation of the female prostate, urethral glands, whatever you want to call it, and the resulting effect of that is quite pleasurable. And it's, done properly, it's pretty certain to deliver a pleasurable effect.
Wonderful. Again, let's say your website again.
drg.com, doctorg.com.
There you go. There's where you can go to find out some more information on this subject. So, thank you for joining us poolside here in Waileakai for this very enlightening a discussion about female sexuality with an expert on the subject. So thank you so much, Gary, for joining. Thank you so much. And really hope you enjoyed this interview. I sure did. And until next time, aloha.
Call me crazy, but I'm never giving up my dreams. No matter how far away they seem, maybe crazy